It has become one of my favorite parts of the week. It's Friday. It's 9 o'clock. We get a half-hour in-studio guest, talk about what's going on in the world in Kansas City and what's going on with them. My good friend, Micheal Mahoney. KMBC longtime political reporter. What's up, Michael?
Good morning, man. Thanks for having me, man. These are sweet digs.
Everybody says that.
You know, this is one of the nicest radio studio complexes I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. And I knew you hadn't been in this building. You've been in the old building a bunch, but you hadn't been here yet. So it's good to get you down here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, folks, this is uptown.
You're absolutely right about that. Well, You know what? They're going to have to just keep listening, though. I can't be bringing people in here all the time. That'd be a little crazy. You want a live audience here for the show? What do you think?
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're wrapping up the DNC this week, and I asked you off the air. You said 14 conventions in person?
In person, yeah.
So do these things still have the meaning they used to have? Because I'm thinking to myself, if there's ever a convention where like the delegates are going to matter, it would have been this week because of the unique circumstances with Harris and Biden. And obviously it was just kind of still the show. Do these things still make a difference?
What's surprising to me is that it was still the show, because what I envisioned in after 2020 was that because both parties had such abbreviated and such different conventions and their format was different, was that was the end of the old 4-day style show that both of them had this year. And it turns out that both campaigns went back to the old style of doing this. I think the D's were a little better on the showbiz side of it. However, they also Democrats couldn't read a clock this week. I mean,
it was late.
Biden went past 11 Central Time, way out of prime time. The Obamas went past, way out of prime time. Walz last night, way out of prime time. Last night, Harris got on during prime time. And normally it's the last night of the convention that's the longest, not the first three. And so it was different. So do they have a place? To galvanize and energize, the loyal soldiers. I don't think that they persuade many voters. I think most of the folks that are watching are already on board. There are some undecideds that go out. That's what makes an acceptance speech in particular important. And then if you like the speaking style of a particular candidate, you'll tune in to see them, deliver their goods, because they are politically big dog, big league speeches.
Mm-hmm. I think as much as anything, too, it seems like these have become opportunities for maybe the next wave to introduce themselves to America, the party.
Absolutely.
I mean, Obama in 2004, that was his kind of breakout moment. We know what happened after that. But everyone's kind of who's getting a speaking slot probably thinks that they're the next fill in the blank, right? And that's part of the purpose of this whole thing?
Well, yeah, and everybody in the political business, if they get one of these speaking slots and it's more than 2 or 3 minutes, envision that they're going to be the next Barack Obama, and it's going to be a breakout speech like he had in 2004 in Boston. It rarely happens like that. But, at both these conventions, there were folks that gave good speeches that raised their profiles, I believe, yeah.
Quentin Lucas was there. Obviously, he was not speaking. How bad do you think he wanted to be up there speaking, though?
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. You see, and it was interesting. Eric Schmidt got a little speaking slot for the R's in Milwaukee, but nothing from the Missouri Dems that got up there. Clinton or Lucas might have been the most likely choice of anybody around here to do it, but no hard to have. No, actually, the most likely should have been Laura Kelly.
Yeah,
because she's now leading the Democratic Governors Association. She knows Walz real well. I had a really interesting conversation with her in Chicago because we did a lot of remote interviews, and she said the DGA, the Democratic governors, are, to use her words, over the moon about having one of theirs on this ticket, because she believes that having a governor as the Veep would give all governors access to the White House in their line of thinking, especially on things like roads, public education, welfare issues, because those are the big three budget items for any state.
That's a good point. All right. Well, Micheal Mahoney is here on KCMO. When you think about your 14 conventions you've covered, is there one that stands out to you above the rest?
There's actually a couple. The first one I did was the Democrats in 1984, and it's just it was special because it's your first. You know? It's like your first date, right?
Yeah,
and it was very cool. Just being at an event like that, and then being able to participate as a reporter at it. New Orleans for the Republicans that in '88, I think, was just it was New Orleans. Okay, it was a pretty good time. And the other one was 2004 with Barack Obama from the standpoint that.
08 with Obama? Or
no,
04?
04.
When he gave that speech?
Yeah, on his breakout speech.
Okay, so Kerry's year.
Yeah, and anyway, there was a guy by the name of Mike Flanagan from WLS and I and 3 or 4 other reporters that got locked out of the convention that night for a little while because the fire marshal had shut the place down. And we had a frank and candid conversation with the doorman for about 15 minutes, a young lady actually, and just went, this is not going to go well for you if we don't get in, okay? and we finally did. And then it turned out that Flanagan's Sky booth was next to the Hearst booth, and right after that speech, I mean, just a great get, he got Obama up in the booth, and so here he is, literally 20 minutes after the biggest speech of his life that was going to change his life, and I'm looking over this guy, just kind of going, man, what's going through your mind right now? Yeah, so
wow.
That was pretty cool stuff.
Now, how about Dole in '96 with him being a Kansas guy? What was that like?
We sent the kitchen sink out to San Diego for that, and that was an okay convention. Dole knew that he was behind. He gave a good speech, not an outstanding speech. He had a couple of lines to the effect that I've seen the past, and I know how to guide the future. So it's kind of a backward-looking speech opposed to Clinton, and he was talking about the bridge to the 21st century and all that sort of stuff, and then Clinton just stomped him. And I remember being at the Dole election watch party in D.C. that night, and it was a double Scotch night for a lot of us folks.
I got to imagine. I mean, obviously, Dole's the closest you got in covering politics in Kansas and Missouri to the White House. Are you at all surprised that of all the people you've covered in Kansas and Missouri, he was the guy who came closest?
No, not really. The other guy that had a legit shot at it from our area was Dick Gephardt, the St. Louis congressman. Had he been able to beat Mike Dukakis in New Hampshire, he might have been able to get the nomination, just like being with Dole in '88. If George Bush had not been able to get to the main TV station in New Hampshire, WMUR, and get a spot on the last weekend of that campaign that called Dole being a straddler on issues. Bob Dole might have won that campaign, because I remember that day, actually that morning of the election and the day before, members of his staff, whispering to Dole, "This way, Mr. President. This way, Mr. President." I mean, because they thought they had it, and they thought they thought they were going to knock off Bush, and that they were on their way. And it was really cool to see these folks believe that they were that close to grabbing the ring, and the other things, like covering these campaigns during the day, it was really interesting to watch some of these guys that would go to Iowa and to New Hampshire, especially early in the campaign the year before, and they would say, and I'm Mike Mahoney, and I'm running for president. They were still sort of wrapping their own head around the fact that they were doing that. And, they obviously got used to it. But when you would see them early on, they were still, struggling with the concept themselves.
What made Dole such a good politician that got him to the point where he was almost president? What made him unique?
One of the things that I always remember about Dole, it's not policy or politics per se. It's the fact this guy knew everybody, and not only did he know everybody, he remembered their names. I mean, it's a great little political skill to have. He would walk into a room, and it's not just in Kansas or in Washington. I saw it out on the road that year. He would walk in a room in Nebraska or Ohio or Illinois or something like that, and he not only knew the politician's name, he probably knew their wife's name and maybe some of their kids. He had a fantastic memory for that, and that's really hard to do. And he was so skillful about it. And then he was a damn good legislator. He was he understood how to press the levers of power in Washington, whether or not he was the Senate Majority Leader or the Minority Leader, and he also had a good sense of loyalty. People forget he was the Republican National Chairman for Richard Nixon during the worst of the Watergate.
That's a good point. Micheal Mahoney is here for our Feature Friday segment on KCMO. We'll take a quick break, come back with more through the bottom of the hour on KCMO 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. 9:20, Micheal Mahoney, longtime, of course, political reporter at KMBC, is here on KCMO. All right, Michael, I mean, there's so much to get to, but we were just talking about this off the air. When you look at the local landscape, you mentioned that from 88 to 2000, Missouri was a swing state. So you had presidential candidates coming through here on a weekly basis, right?
Right. Sometimes during the primary, because the Missouri primary was contested on both sides, and so they would come in for the primary because they knew that Missouri was going to be a battleground state, and then the presidential campaigns made frequent stops here. And as we were talking off the air, I remember that in the year 2000, it was Bush and Gore. Both these campaigns were in the state on a weekly basis, which, may sound fun to a political junkie, but as we were talking, they were in so much, and a presidential stop requires a lot of time to set up and to also cover, because you're in a bullpen for hours on a time and stuff like that, that it actually started to be a pain in the butt because you weren't able to cover your other local races, Senate races, congressional races, county and state legislative races, because you were locked into the presidential campaign. Now, it was cool, but it was also, like I say, it became a complicating factor in doing the rest of your job. It was odd.
But now, we sit here, and obviously neither state's a swing state, and we don't even have a lot of swing districts anymore. I mean, we just talked Sharice Davids. She's clearly a favorite once again, as she should be right now, and you've got a prediction on that front, I know, where she may have this thing locked up for a while.
Yeah, I think if she wins this reelect and then stands for election again in 2 years, which I imagine she'll do, and that would put her into pretty much safe seat status, and that's when Congress sort of changes for a member of Congress, because you're no longer actually spending a substantial part of your week raising money, literally in a small cubicle over at the Republican National Headquarters or the Democratic National Headquarters with a phone and a money list in front of you, and you're cold calling people in some cases to raise money for your funds, for your campaign. That eases a little bit, when you get 4 or 5 terms underneath your belt, then you're going to get a bunch of the institutional money. Whether that's good or bad is a different discussion. So We'll see where it goes. And this was the great fear of Johnson County and Kansas Republicans, was that once Kevin Yoder was defeated by Sharice Davids, that they were going to lose that seat for a long time. Now, I was skeptical about that, but the dynamics of the Johnson County in particular have changed so much since the Yoder David's race, that it's bearing out that maybe she can turn it into a safe Democratic seat.
Yeah, we'll see what happens here coming up in a couple of months with Prashant Reddy on the other side. Now, your career spans 45 years. Is that safe to say?
Well, if you put it all together, over 50 years. I did 41 in Kansas City. I worked in Des Moines, Iowa, for the ABC station there for a couple of years. I worked in Wilmington, North Carolina for a couple of years. I had a radio job in Columbia, Missouri when I went to school there that had nothing to do with the university. And I also worked on their operations as well. But I worked as a newsman in a rock and roll station in Columbia, KTGR, which is still on the air.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. And they're no longer...
they're sports now.
Yeah. And before that, in my hometown in Iowa, we were situated under the Mississippi River bluffs, and so my hometown was one of the first, 100 or 200 communities in America to get cable TV, way back in the 1960s, okay? And I happened to befriend the manager of the station, or the cable operation, and he let me do sports for those guys, just little updates, and that sort of morphed into doing play-by-play. What we would do is we'd take a videotape machine, a big one, the size of a trunk, out to high school basketball and football games, and then we would videotape those games. I'd do the play-by-play, and then we would play it back the next morning, and then that morphed into us putting the games on the time and temperature cable channel that they had, because we didn't have a nighttime radio station in this town.
Wow.
So I did, 3-4 years all through high school of sports play-by-play. I did a couple of years of sports play-by-play in Columbia as well. I really liked it. I thought I wanted to be a sportscaster, but at the time I was getting into all this stuff. The only people they were hiring to do that were ex-jocks. I mean, there were no... It was the late 70s, and unless you were playing ball professionally, you didn't have a shot at a big job.
Well, look at how it turned out for you pretty damn well.
Yeah.
So when you look... We've got a couple minutes here, but when you look at the top stories you've covered in Kansas City, what comes to mind?
Well, I was at the Hyatt Hotel the night that the skywalks fell down. We were covering a feature about the tea dances there. The hotel was new, and that was their way of introducing the hotel to Kansas City with these Friday night dances. I was the feature reporter at Channel 9 at the time, and I didn't particularly like being a feature reporter because up in Iowa I was covering the State House, but it was taking the job in Kansas City was a nice bump up. I did it, and covering the Hyatt ended the feature days, and I did the investigation reporting on that. I did some organized crime reporting here that was interesting to say the least. And then lots of good stories from politics. The one I remember that I broke at the first convention was there was an effort to raid some. Walter Mondale got the nomination for the Democrats, but Gary Hart was pretty close. He was only 150 votes behind him in that, and there was an effort to try and raid some votes out of the Mondale column, and it started in Minnesota, where they came up with the idea of nominating then Missouri Senator Tom Eagleton for vice president off the floor in an effort to try and raid Missouri and Minnesota votes, because Eagleton was a pro-life Democrat. They don't exist anymore, but they did then. And I broke that story from the floor out there, and it's real inside baseball, but it's something I'm real proud of.
Well, we got less than a minute, but I just asked you off the air. Golf games going okay or not so much?
I'm not. I will always be a bad golfer. I will always be a bad golfer.
That makes two of us, man. So we got to do it together. Yeah, that's what has to happen.
It's like I used to play softball, and a buddy of mine said, "Mahoney, you took up golf too late. What you have to resign yourself to is you will always suck at golf." And then the game became fun when I resigned myself to that.
Oh, gosh. And a drink or two never hurt. At least the 19th hole can be pretty good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, Michael, thanks for making the trip in, my friend. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. I enjoy being on your show. I always enjoy listening to your show. You do a great job with making this this program an informative local show, and you're good at it.
Thank you, Michael. Means a lot. Micheal Mahoney, our good friend, KMBC political reporter, rolling through the morning news in a minute.